Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts living in a whole new world again. One without his longtime number one receiver, A.J. Brown. One with yet another new offensive play caller in Sean Mannion. Here was Hurts talking about the process of getting up to speed in another new offense.
I call it the time of calibrating. You know, you're kind of figuring it out, putting it together, you know, and I've kind of always played the position in a calculated way. And so I think the more I learn and the more I ingrain myself into what we're doing now, I think the better, better off we'll be and the better off we'll flow when the season comes. But, there's always that onboarding period with a new coach and a new system, especially something as new and as fresh as this.
Well, again, that's something he pretty much does every year. Jeremy Fowler continues his tour of training camps. He's actually at the Jets today, but you were there with the Eagles yesterday. And I was reading your notes this morning with great interest, Jeremy, as far as how different Jalen Hurts looks and what that might mean for this offense.
Greeny, Jalen Hurts looks quicker, he looks faster, and I asked some coaches about that. They said they've noticed the very same thing. So expect some design runs for Jalen Hurts this year to try to get his dual threat swag back. He didn't quite have that last year, wasn't as explosive of a runner. His passing game suffered a little bit as a result. So that's one thing to look out for 2025. Also, Hurts feels like he's making strides in this new offense with offensive coordinator Sean Mannion. It's going to be a lot more under center work. So Hurts is working on marrying his footwork with his eyes. If he does that, it feels like he can drive the ball. The ball will go naturally where it needs to go. I caught Mannion coming off the field yesterday. He told me that's the very first thing Hurts dug in on is the footwork, which really helped both of them in their marriage. They can look at the big picture of attacking defenses.
All right, I know you're busy today. Got to run over and do some stuff with the Jets there. I, in particular, will look forward to hearing your reporting on that later in the day. Jeremy, thank you. Let me bring it out here. As in the notes, it seems that and I think you could see it in those shots, Jalen Hurts has lost a little weight. He wanted to be quicker. And the idea that the quarterback run would be more a part of the offense again, something that he was so effective doing for several years and then seemed to do much less of in recent years. I defer to your expertise. Seems to me that re-adding that quarterback run would be a very important dimension for the Eagles.
Well, of course, no doubt. The run game has to be effective. You go back to 2024 when they won the Super Bowl, Greeny, they were second in the National Football League.
Right.
Last year, they were 18th.
That's because Saquon went nuts, right?
Exactly.
But the threat of Jalen, I think, was a factor in that.
But also slimming down, it's about the naked bootleg game and being able to get your quarterbacks on the edge. That's what this offense demands. And Jalen Hurts has to be effective as a runner because it's going to make the pass game that much easier. But we talk about Jalen Hurts so much. I think we need to look at this offensive line, Greeny. They need to be better than they were a season ago because they got whooped game in and game out. That's why that run game was not effective. It may be another reason why Jalen Hurts didn't feel as comfortable in the pocket or running the football like he did in 2024 previous years. But in order for this offense to be effective, that run game, Jalen Hurts being a part and an extension of that run game has to be valuable so the play action can be feasible.
So, Kmart, you've been driving the bandwagon of Jalen Hurts for us on this show for years. The 8 rushing touchdowns last year, that number I think is very skewed because of the tush push, right? So I'm less concerned with the touchdowns than what Harry is talking about. The actual designed runs, him being a legitimate threat in the offense with his legs. That was one of the things that made him special. And they just, for whatever reason, injury or whatever it was, seemed to go away from that.
I think last year it was sort of who are the Eagles? Because you mentioned the offensive line inconsistencies. It seemed like we were looking at injuries. Different pairs on that offensive line throughout the season. Jalen Hurts seemed different. Now you take A.J. Brown out of the equation. You can't praise the Patriots for, okay, look at that offense with A.J. Brown and not also touch on the deficit of losing A.J. Brown. I think you need Devontae Smith to have a fantastic year. You need Saquon. It starts with the run game. It starts with Jalen Hurts having to be somebody that you're actually like, okay, wait, is he going to run? Is he going to pass? You need to have some sort of surprise element in there, and they became a little bit too predictable last year.
Hawk, I think that's what it's about. We can talk all we want about Devontae Smith and the quick passing game and all the rest of that. If Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, in the reverse order, are the lethal rushing threat that they were a couple of years ago, then this offense works no matter who's calling the plays, right?
And that's what it comes down to, Greeny. And that scheme is such a big part of that. Like Harry talks about that offensive line. When you watch the receivers play last year, there was so much left to the imagination of what could happen with so much talent there. When you watch the running backs, every piece of the units on offense, none of them had the level of detail that this offense demands. So Jalen Hurts talking about the footwork and some of the simple things you would expect a quarterback of his tenure to already have down packed. It's him kind of reconfiguring his mind to fit the offense. And as every single position does that, it comes together like a beautiful puzzle. Because absolutely, if that offensive line is coached in operating that scheme the way they're supposed to, well, then you have a better Saquon Barkley. You have more explosive plays. You have him getting downhill. You have defense that have to respect that, and then it mirrors up perfectly with play action. Jalen Hurts being in better shape helps boots, helps getting out the pocket, more clear pictures. So the offense should be the best and most efficient it has, but it does start with that detail with Jalen Hurts and that run game, offensive line, and Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, it all really jumped off the notes at me when I was reading this stuff from Jeremy today. So we'll see how much of a part of that offense it is. Meantime, Harry, I want to ask...
Ravens 2013 Seahawks, but I think this has the opportunity to be the best tandem defensive line-wise that we've ever seen amongst the National Football League. And the reason why the Rams go and make these upgrades, go back to the NFC Championship game a year ago, Greeny, where Sam Darnold threw for 346 yards and 3 touchdowns. They couldn't sack the quarterback effectively. They couldn't stop guys in the secondary. You make all these moves so you can contend and win a Super Bowl. But that's not the biggest thing on my list for the Los Angeles Rams.
Okay.
I think they have the most pressure of any team in the National Football League to win that Super Bowl. The last time that they won one, it was in SoFi Stadium. This year, the Super Bowl is going to be hosted in SoFi Stadium. You're bringing Aaron Donald. You're bringing Myles Garrett. You're trading for Trent McDuffie to go along with all the firepower that you have offensively. Sean McVay, as a head coach, it's his job to make sure that his players take it 1 week at a time and they don't look ahead.
Here's the reality. They don't need to be the greatest defense of all time because last year they lost by 4 points in the NFC title game.
Mm-hmm.
What you have right now is a team on this roster. They had last year's leader in sacks, last year's leader in receiving touchdowns, last year's leader in receptions, the MVP. It's not just the defense.
Yeah.
This entire roster is built to win it all. So to Harry's point, the pressure is extremely high. But they came within an inch of going to the Super Bowl, and a lot of people thought, myself included, that they were actually the better team last year. So we'll see. It's on them now to prove it.
I agree with you. There has never been or there have rarely been teams that were more Super Bowl or bust than this team is right now. They're as all in can be. And yes, I agree. Of course, the most important part is the winning. I am interested, as one who cares about and is fascinated by the history of the sport, whether they could be one of the great defenses of all time. You ran down, in the modern era of pro football, the great defenses start with the steel curtain defenses in Pittsburgh in the 70s, and then you went through them. The 85 Bears, the 2000 Ravens, the Buddy Ryan Eagles, who never won a championship, so sometimes get forgotten, maybe Tampa in the early 2000s, and then the Legion of Boom. The game is so different now, Hawk, that the numbers may not look it. The game is so much more skewed towards offense than it was. Let's just use the 85 Bears. I was a freshman in college in Evanston, Illinois. I watched every snap of the 85 Bears season. I've always said they could have punted on first down when they got the ball, and they still would have gone 8-8. If they literally played without an offense, that team would have gone 8-8. I don't think you can do that in the NFL anymore because the rules are so skewed towards offense. So the numbers may not, when the season ends, the numbers may not say they were the greatest defense of all time, but that doesn't mean, Hawk, that they won't dominate. Let's just live in this one, Stick. We'll push back the other stuff we were going to do. Hawk, take me into the planning meeting, okay? You're playing them week 1. You're San Francisco, of all things. In their case, everybody's hurt. You're in Australia, for crying out loud. And now we're going to we're in our planning meeting, and they're going to have Myles Garrett, and they're going to have Aaron Donald. You tell me, what is that offensive meeting like?
It's a prayer visual is what it is, Greeny, because there is no strategy. If Aaron Donald comes back as Aaron Donald, I'm telling you, there's not a strategy that you can think of to say, oh, man, how do you stop 5 Defensive Player of the Year awards on one defensive line? That is almost impossible. My offensive lineman would sit up at night, weeks leading up to a game, with just Aaron Donald, the same way they do with just Myles Garrett, and they're both there. And on the back end, to you guys' point, the margin of victory for the Seahawks in those late season matchups was paper thin. And they've added 2 top-level corners on the back end and 2 of the best defensive linemen in NFL history on the front end. That is not just pressure. That's unprecedented.
So, Greeny, you're sitting in those meetings on Wednesday.